What happens when a royal accustomed to control collides with a host who refuses to yield? That was the question answered in Studio 6A when Meghan Markle walked onto the Tamron Hall Show. The set gleamed with polished wood, golden lighting, and the low hum of a studio audience expecting charm, candor, perhaps even redemption. Meghan entered draped in a cream-colored tailored dress, her hair styled with deliberate precision. Her smile was practiced, with gracious, but with an unmistakable edge. The audience applauded politely, though not with the thunder reserved for beloved celebrities. It was curiosity, not affection, that filled the air. Tamron Hall, in an emerald silk blouse, greeted her warmly. "Welcome, Meghan. Thank you for joining us today." Meghan tilted her head, flashing her signature poised smile. "Thank you, Tamron. It's always nice to speak to someone who understands the importance of narrative." The words carried weight, flattering on the surface but edged with control. Tamron began with her steady professionalism. "Before we dive into your latest projects, the public remains curious. How are you and Harry navigating life after stepping back from royal duties?" The opener was soft, a chance for honesty. Meghan leaned forward. "We're thriving. People forget that we chose peace over a toxic institution. If anyone questions that, perhaps they should examine why they're so invested in criticizing us instead of reflecting on their own shortcomings." A ripple went through the room. Some shifted uncomfortably. A few eyebrows rose. The air thickened. Tamron did not flinch. "Fair point," she said evenly, "but much of that speculation follows the interviews, the memoir, the Netflix series. Do you think openness invites scrutiny?" Meghan's smile cooled. "We don't invite anything. We correct lies. That's called survival, not publicity." The applause was hesitant, scattered. The tension was beginning to show. Tamron shuffled her notes with calm precision. "Some say stepping away from the monarchy was a struggle. Do you ever feel conflict about that decision?" Meghan's eyes sharpened. "No, the only conflict exists in tabloids. I never wanted to live as a prop in a pageant. I wanted freedom. Anyone who clings to the old fairy tale is stuck in the past." Gasps rippled across the audience. The disdain was clear. Meghan wasn't just rejecting an institution. She was dismissing the people who valued it. Tamron, unshaken, tilted her head. "Some would argue those traditions symbolize service. That stepping away meant abandoning responsibility." "Responsibility?" Meghan snapped, her voice harder now. "To stand on balconies and wave at strangers? That's not responsibility. That's exploitation." The crowd stirred, uncomfortable, some shaking their heads. Tamron leaned forward, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Others might call it tradition. Do you think your disdain is personal rather than systemic?" Meghan's expression tightened. "Are you suggesting I left out a spite? Please, anyone with half a brain can see the monarchy is rotten." The insult landed heavy. The studio stiffened. One woman in the second row frowned, shaking her head. The audience, once neutral, cooled further. Tamron did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her composure was more cutting than anger. "Our audience is quite intelligent, Meghan," she said softly. "They came to hear truth, not contempt." The applause erupted, not for the guest, but for the host. Meghan's eyes flicked to the crowd, and for the first time her confidence faltered. By the end of the first segment, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. What began as polite curiosity had hardened into quiet judgment. Meghan sat straighter, defensive, her tone clipped. Tamron's calm only magnified the contrast, elegance against arrogance. The battle lines were drawn, and everyone in the studio knew the real show had only just begun. The cameras faded back in after the commercial break, but the atmosphere had changed. Gone was the soft curiosity that greeted Meghan Markle's entrance. What lingered now was unease, sharpened by Tamron Hall's calm but unyielding composure. Meghan adjusted her dress, shoulders squared, her smile thinner now. She was prepared for battle. Tamron spoke first, her tone polite but precise. "You've spoken often about injustice, about being silenced. But some critics point to the Netflix deal, the Spotify contract, the memoir. Do you see why people question whether the narrative of struggle matches the fortune?" The air in the room shifted. The question was surgical, cutting straight to the contradiction. Meghan's eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with controlled indignation. Ah, the obsession with money. Let me make this clear. When we were cut off financially, we had no choice but to build opportunities. Should we have starved to make the critics comfortable? Polite applause flickered in a corner of the audience, but it was lukewarm. Tamron allowed a pause, then smiled faintly. There's a difference between survival and empire building. Some say the story you sell, of being silenced and struggling, doesn't align with the level of wealth you've acquired. That contradiction is what they question. The audience murmured in agreement. It was the first audible rumble of alignment with the host. Meghan bristled, her tone sharpening. People love fairy tales. The poor little duchess cast out by the palace, forced to scrape by. Reality is complicated, but most people aren't intelligent enough to understand nuance. That was the breaking point. The studio gasped. Groans, a few outright boos. Meghan had turned her disdain not just on tabloids, but on the very people sitting in front of her. Tamron's expression didn't change. Her eyes simply sharpened. So, when questioned, your answer is that people aren't intelligent enough to understand you. Yes, Meghan shot back, her voice clipped. They twist everything. They'll never get it. The silence was crushing. The audience shifted, restless, offended, arms crossed, frowns deepening. Tamron let it linger, then leaned in, her tone quiet but devastating. Perhaps the issue isn't their intelligence. Perhaps it's your unwillingness to accept accountability. The studio erupted. Applause cracked like thunder, sharp and decisive. Meghan's cheeks flushed crimson. She snapped back, her voice rising. Accountability? Don't lecture me about accountability. I've lived through trauma you could never understand. Tamron's voice cut cleanly, steady as stone. And yet you've chosen to narrate that trauma again and again in public. Each time the story shifts. Each time the blame grows wider. That's not survival. That's fixation. The blow landed hard. Meghan opened her mouth, then closed it. The audience clapped again. Louder this time. A man in the third row muttered, "Finally?" Loud enough for the microphones to catch. Tamron didn't gloat. She simply moved forward. Let's talk about your family. There are reports of tension with your brother-in-law and Catherine. Do you feel overshadowed by them? Meghan gave a brittle laugh. Overshadowed? Please. I brought honesty, courage, modernity. They only shine because the palace hides their flaws. Without that machinery, they wouldn't last a week. The audience recoiled. A few shook their heads. Some gasped. Tamron's reply was velvet over steel. So you believe their popularity is artificial, manufactured? Of course, Meghan sneered. They play roles. They smile. They blah. They're puppets, and people lap it up. But the words didn't wound the royals. They wounded her. The murmurs of disgust grew louder. Tamron clasped her hands together, her voice measured. Some might say that sounds less like critique, more like envy. Do you envy their steadiness? The respect they command? Meghan's smirk faltered, then stiffened into defiance. Envy? Don't be ridiculous. I left by choice. I'm above that circus. But the audience wasn't convinced. Their silence was no longer neutral. It was judgment, heavy and cold. Tamron leaned closer, her tone lower, piercing. You say you're above it, yet every answer tonight circles back to the crown. If you've moved on, why do you sound chained to what you left behind? Meghan's mouth opened. No words came. The silence roared. The audience clapped, louder, bolder, now certain where they stood. The power had shifted entirely. And for the first time, Meghan Markle looked cornered, her practiced composure cracking under the weight of questions she could no longer control. The third segment began without the usual sparkle of daytime TV. No playful music, no glossy introductions, just Meghan Markle, visibly rigid in her chair, and Tamron Hall, composed as ever under the unforgiving lights of Studio 6A. The audience sensed it. The atmosphere had shifted from polite curiosity to open reckoning. Tamron leaned forward, her tone soft but piercing. You've insisted tonight that you've built an independent identity. Yet every answer circles back to the monarchy. Without the crown, the very thing you condemn, Would you be sitting here at all? Meghan's face flushed, her smile gone. How dare you reduce me? I had a career before the royal family. I was an actress. I worked hard. Tamron nodded, respectful but firm. And many respect that. But they also see a woman who condemns the monarchy while profiting from its name, who asks for privacy but sells confession, who demands sympathy while showing disdain. That contradiction is what people see. The applause was instant, sharp, and thunderous. Meghan's jaw tightened. This is a setup, she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. You brought me here to humiliate me. No, Tamron replied evenly. I brought you here to be accountable for your words. Meghan turned to the audience, desperation creeping in. If you were smart, you'd understand the truth. That was it. The room shifted violently. Boos echoed, groans. Several people shook their heads in disgust. The tide had fully turned. Tamron's voice cut through the noise. Calm, commanding. Enough is enough. The studio froze. Every camera locked in. Every eye focused. We do not insult our viewers here. We do not condescend to the public. This is not a stage for contempt, Tamron said, her voice steady, each word a dagger. The studio exploded in applause. It wasn't polite anymore. It was furious, unified, final. Meghan stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. I don't have to sit here and take this. Tamron met her eyes, unshaken. You don't. But you also don't get to rewrite the truth when the applause stops. Security edged forward discreetly, but Meghan waved them off with a sharp gesture. She turned, storming toward the exit. The cameras followed just long enough to capture it, her heels striking hard against the floor, her shoulders stiff, her composure dissolving into visible fury. The audience erupted again, some clapping, some gasping, many shaking their heads. It wasn't just television anymore. It was spectacle. It was history. When Meghan was gone, Tamron turned back to the camera, her voice calm but ringing with finality. This wasn't cruelty. It was accountability. Public figures don't get to shift their stories without scrutiny. Celebrity is not credibility, and truth does not bow to titles. The screen faded to black. Within minutes, the clips went viral. Headlines exploded across social media. Tamron Hall stands her ground. Meghan Markle storms out. Enough is enough. The showdown that shook daytime TV. Audience applauds Tamron, not Meghan. And for once, the public wasn't divided. The consensus was clear. Meghan had walked in expecting control, but she walked out defeated. Her polished charm shattered under the weight of poise, precision, and one unshakable host.